What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Black Belt Business Podcast. I'm your host, Elliot Marshall, and it is my goal with each episode of this podcast to share the stories, strategies, tactics, tools, and resources that will help you establish or grow your martial arts school. The Black Belt Business Podcast is brought to you by Easton.Online. You can find all of our digital courses, martial arts curriculums, and resources designed to help you enhance your business at Easton.Online. So without further ado, let's jump into the episode. We are back, another episode of Easton.Online podcast. Don't forget, if you find these podcasts helpful, enjoyable, informational, anything, please share. Please leave us a comment, like, all that good stuff. So this episode, we are back with our every other guest in Mike and Ian, and we have also the founder with us, Amal. What's up, guys? How's everyone doing?
Hey. Good morning.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
And sorry about the 3 mics thing. I guess, Phipps, we have to buy another mic, okay? Just in case we ever have a 4th guest. So just a little housekeeping there. Man, let's just talk about the meeting we just did to start. I thought it was productive. I hope it wasn't too much for you guys. We just had like a check-in meeting, a vision meeting. I don't know. What would you call that meeting, Mike?
Well, I just labeled it what we originally called it, was the vision meeting.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was that, but we didn't get to the vision point of it. I think what I would call that is a significant improvement from 10 years ago. That's what I would call that.
Look, let's just describe 10 years ago, right? Because I think a lot of people are in the 10 years ago space.
Yeah.
Right? You try to have a meeting, and you're all, with your big players, right? And at the time, we were the only big players probably, right? Maybe 1 or 2 more. Yes? And now there's many more big players, I would say. I hope. Because I'm not in the day-to-day stuff as much, and neither is Amal. So what did 10 years ago feel like and look like for you? What did it feel like and look like for you, and then I'll share. Because I think it's just nice for people to see, like, oh shit, maybe I'm not the only one who's can't get this part right now.
I would jump right in that. Yeah. I think the key word is structure.
But what did it feel like? What was it like before?
Chaos.
What was the chaos?
The chaos was, well, we no agendas, right? So the chaos came in like every Monday we would meet to discuss what the plan is, the vision, where we're headed, blah, blah, blah. But there was we've all read the books on it and stuff, but we didn't have any structure in place like we did with our curriculum, right? And so I feel like we would go in just kind of on a whim, all different ideas. And for me personally, I wasn't in a place that was like that even keel, obviously, so it wasn't healthy for me. But it was just sort of chaos and just kind of talking about whatever on a whim without like really staying to a structured agenda. And I think that really it was a learning lesson, right? Mm-hmm. But yeah, it felt nerve-wracking, I would say. Like for me personally, it was always like nerve-wracking. Like, am I going to get in a fight with them all today? We're going to scream at each other, or is it going to be productive? You never know. Or are we going to just shoot the shit for an hour and not really get anything done? I never do. I know for this meeting today, we haven't done it in a minute. I made sure to meditate. I had a little rock with me just in case, because sometimes it's from trauma. Not that we do that anymore, but there's trauma in the past of how these meetings used to go. They could flare up and go poorly. So I made sure I come into these very centered and like ready to listen and be a part of something, whatever direction it goes. Where before I wasn't like that. It's just chaos and on a whim. What's going to happen next?
I think the poor end of it, where even the one earlier, like an hour ago, could have gone, is just our deep history with each other. Like we're so, even though we're not personally intertwined anymore, but we just have been with each other for as long as we've probably been with our wives, right? Like maybe longer. So yeah. that and like when you sit down and have a meeting with your wife, sometimes your spouse, that can be difficult as well, right?
I would say that's probably way harder.
The spouse?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Always,
for sure.
forever.
Always, yeah.
Unless you're the lady from next.
Yeah. Amal, how did the meetings used to go for you? Like what was your experience like 10 years ago when we used to have a meeting?
Way more organized now. We actually get stuff done. We have an agenda. We move through it in a clear, organized fashion. I think that The meetings that we were running back in the day, you just kind of see to your pants. A lot. I think about the curriculum in the school. Before you have a curriculum, you walk in and you're just kind of like, okay, it's a two-step plan. Show up and teach class and teach whatever the hell I want. I think the meetings were very similar. All right, guys, what should we talk about? I don't know, and then it would turn into total Lord knows what. And it was fun to hang out, but that's what we were doing. I think, to be clear, we weren't really running meetings. We were hanging out.
We would hang out, and if it went well, we would probably go to lunch together or train. And if it didn't go well, we would leave mad. Probably is how it went, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah? Yeah. All right. Ian, you used to talk about dreading these meetings.
Yeah, no, I did, because I feel like now I'm much more involved, and I was just I got in at the sort of tail end of those meetings. And I was, I don't love conflict, and there was always the potential that it could go very poorly, and people, like you said, would leave mad. I think one of the things that is very different, it's the history, it's the structure, and it's also the fact that we have a lot of experience on knowing where they can go wrong and setting up the agreements. So before each meeting, we make agreements with each other, right? So, like, for example, like, assume good intent, no interrupting, and so on and so on. But it just gives you a sort of a map to. It's like, so there's the agenda, so we stay on topic. But there's also just, you know where the potholes are, and it's easier to avoid them. So my experience back then was very much mirrored what everybody else said, and now it's much smoother and more enjoyable and more productive.
We've said this a couple times, agreements. You said it. I don't know if you said it or not. And it's maybe, I don't know, maybe to some of you listening, it sounds kind of dumb. Like, what do you mean make an agreement before a meeting? Well, no, we're going to meet and we're going to talk. That's what we used to do, right? And then Larry gave us this idea of, it was Larry, right? Because he was the first one that did it. Where we actually, on the whiteboard, and I didn't have a whiteboard today, we had to grab a piece of paper. Where is it? I think it's under here somewhere. It's on the back of one of those pieces of paper.
Yeah,
like, flip it. There they are. So
agreements for today.
So we wrote them down, when we say make agreements, it is what we'll all follow. And then you were in charge, Mike, and you would pull the meeting back if we were breaking an agreement. Right? Like,
yeah, we choose a leader of the meeting, whoever the hell it is. It doesn't really matter, right? The facilitator, if you will. And today was kind of a mix. But I think to your point is a meeting should be structured where what we're doing now is a podcast.
Right.
We may have some themes to talk about, but this is a hangout, right?
Right.
That's the difference between like a meeting and a podcast or a hangout.
Different purposes.
Yeah, different
meetings,
purposes.
You got to move somewhere with them.
Yes.
Right? You got to move somewhere with them. There has to be like, okay, this is what the accomplishment, this is the goal we're trying to accomplish with this meeting. And then you go somewhere. We're just talking about ideas, right? We're going to talk about we talk about a whole bunch of them on a podcast. And like, maybe we flesh them out, maybe we don't. And it doesn't really matter.
It would have been great to have microphones 10 years ago, though.
It would have. And record it. We should have recorded it.
We probably would have been better behavior, though, if we had microphones.
And recorded it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think our biggest agreement, if we're just going to stick on this agreement topic with meetings, is not taking things personally. But sometimes they can really sound very personal. When you're critiquing or saying, hey, you did this or I did that. Like, so how have we developed, right? And I'm asking you two guys here, this idea of not taking things personally when you're talking to your staff and when you have to critique the staff. And I would like you to compare it with how we used to do it, right? Like when we used to critique someone this way and they took it very personally. And how do we do it a little better now in meetings and both on the one-on-one? Ian, you want to handle it first?
Sure. I would say, the core values play a big part here. Compassion and trust specifically, I think are very useful to keep in mind. And one of the things that we talk about a lot is, assuming good intent. I think that's a two-way street, right? So like, we're not always going to be perfect wordsmiths. And sometimes when we're emotional or we're talking about something that's really important, we can maybe our words aren't chosen exactly or as precisely as we wish they could have in that moment, but we're always trying to, and that's the key piece. We're always trying to take into account how what we're saying is going to be is going to land. And then on the other side of that, if someone isn't a perfect wordsmith, we always assume that their intentions are good, right? We're all trying to achieve very similar things. We all want to get, across or as close to the finish line as we can. So it's working as a team to do it. And I think that it's, the compassion is being, it's when you're giving your feedback or you're stating your opinion, it's doing it in a compassionate way. So the person that you're speaking to, it's a lot easier for them to assume good intent. And then on the other side of it, it's trusting. It's trusting that we're all in this together and we're trying to reach a common goal, and that disagreement is a part of it sometimes. So
I think to solidify it a little bit, I mean, Ian has to have these conversations more than any of us, as far as he runs the general managers, and the GMs have to have these a lot, and so does Ian. In my shoes these days, I'm lucky enough to work with the leadership team, so they've already kind of cooked for a long time. So they often catch themselves before we have to have this like a hard conversation or any of that. But I think, Ian, since you do this a lot, I think you had a really good one yesterday that built quite a bit of trust with an individual. And I think that's something that you could kind of touch on, because I know sometimes in the past with this individual, it's been hard to get them to connect to you'd give them the feedback. They're like, yeah, okay, over and over again. Yeah, okay. But you never really saw action, or you never knew if it was getting through to him. But yesterday you had a conversation that we talked about, and there was tension. They gave pushback, and you were like, boom, now we're connecting. You finally had that moment with them where they go, actually, I want to push back and disagree with you on this. And whether you agreed with their pushback or not, it finally showed that they were listening, they were standing on their own 2 feet, and they were being present in the conversation. And then they're going to do a better job, I think, moving forward, because they're willing to see what's happening and tell you, actually, I think you're wrong. And maybe that will translate in how they deal with their staff. They're just not going to be, just go with the flow. And I thought the way you described that yesterday, and the trust that came out of that, basically tension came out of that, and it actually solidified your relationship tighter, is something that you said.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think I would say that being vulnerable is a superpower, and I think it's a big part of this, right? It's I think in that moment, right, it's very hard because there's a dynamic, right? It's when he reports to me ostensibly, and so he doesn't, there's always the risk that if you disagree with the person that you're reporting to, it might, it could damage your relationship. And I think it's being open. It's also just being open to being wrong. It's being open, having an open mind, being open to the fact that you don't know everything. So when I was in that conversation, I might be wrong. I have my opinions about things, but that might not. So do they. And I think a good relationship, and I think we really foster this at Easton, is it's communication up and down, and it's being vulnerable and admitting that, hey, I might not actually be right about this. And I think that openness makes it does build trust. And I think trust is, one thing that I'm getting long-winded here, but one of the words that I've always I take issue with is the word loyalty, because it almost implies that it's a one-way street, and that the person, whoever, let's say if I'm the person owing loyalty to somebody, that the person who I owe loyalty to, that there's nothing they can do to break that oath of loyalty. And I don't agree with that. I think we were just having a conversation a minute ago how we're we have to earn this every day. We have to always be earning our keep. We have to be, and trust is earned, and it can be, it's like a tree, right? There's that saying, it can take years and years to grow, and you can cut it down in a moment. So we're really only as trustworthy as the last, conversation we had. We only get to make, we only make sense as if the last sentences we uttered adhere to reality. And I think that, building trust with our team is one of the most important things we can do, and it happens through vulnerability and showing that they can say things without consequence, and we can be wrong.
If I can jump in for a second,
Yeah.
I think that the trust and the respect, one of the biggest problems people have, and we've definitely went through this, is if you don't trust and respect the people that you're sitting with, it's very hard to go through that. So the first thing is, we happen to all be friends, but I really do believe that everybody here occupies a very important role within our company. right? They don't overlap so much. We have clearly defined people. So we can sit here and it's a four-legged stool. If any of us disappeared, then I feel like that stool is super wobbly. So you can look and say, okay, I need to mind my words because I do actually trust and respect all the people sitting at this table. And I think it's easy to take that for granted when you have that room. And I think if you look around your room and you say, do I think that guy's a moron, or do I think they actually trust and respect him? So that gets built from way back, and that is not an easy task when you're starting a company.
Man, I want to talk about this loyalty thing for a second, because I thought you brought it up, and it's such a big theme in martial arts, right? And you must be loyal to your school and to your teacher. Like you hear this all the time, right? Do we disagree here or not disagree?
I agree.
Yeah. And I personally think, and I think we all agree, I think it's the other way. Shit. Cut that out, Phipps. Sorry. I personally think it's the other way around. I think the loyalty's got to come from the school and the teacher first. It's not this like, oh, you signed up here, therefore you must be loyal to us. It's just wrong. Like Amal's got to, in a way, I mean, not so much anymore because it's been so long. He's got to be loyal to me first, as the student. And then we got to be loyal to you guys first because you were our students, by showing up, providing a good product, providing a good environment, doing all of these things so that the student actually wants to stay and has a reason to be loyal, right? And this is kind of what we're talking about here. And I just think it gets so twisted,
It's like servant leadership, right? It's the idea that we're here to serve, and I think this is one of the best styles of leadership, that we're here to serve, the students and our team. You guys have always done that, right? So like when I was talking about that, it's like I feel the same way. I trust everybody at this table implicitly, and it's but I think I trust you, and it's not this just undying. It's not this loyalty that I feel like I have to show to get your trust. You know what I mean? I think it's based on the people that we try to be and the values that we have, and I think that's the stuff that really matters.
I think sometimes, and this is to all of you here, and I know we touch on this topic a lot, especially I think we touch on it more with this podcast in the three of us rather than the Jordan and Phipps podcast. Because I think sometimes if this is somebody's first time listening to us, Easton.Online, right, and like getting to know Easton, they hear these words, right, like these vulnerable agreements. What else have we said? Values. And we can just go so into the weeds of this and be like, man, these woke motherfuckers. Right? These woke motherfuckers, like, we have lost the art of beating someone up. Right? Because you can just hear that. And because of all of the social media that we hear, depending on what news you listen to and all that shit, how do we... I want to talk about what these words really mean. Like we're not just vulnerable for like, oh man, I'm feeling really sad today, so can I have a timeout, please, and make sure I have my safe space. Like, what is actual vulnerability? And it doesn't happen every day, right? But what would you say? What's actual vulnerability, Mike?
Well, to speak to that, like what we're talking about now versus how we came up.
Yeah.
One of my favorite songs that I like to listen to, or want to play all the time, is Still Dre.
I love that song.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, we're the people we're here to conduct ourselves in a professional manner, do these things for the company, talk about core values and vulnerability. But man, we still get that Dre side of us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That still exists. Like we still came from this spot where we were just beating each other up every day, and that didn't just go away. Right, like, but we've learned over the years, like, there's better ways to do things, or we can improve upon those things. That doesn't change. That didn't change, like part of our foundation, right? We just saw improvements we can make to better serve people. So I just always think about that when it's like, if you haven't been on the mats for a while, or it's like, oh no, you're confused. Anyway, that's a
great
sidebar.
That's a great example because because you have to hold this other end up too, because and we talk about this, like, you can't have all these values and all these things and then just be a bunch of fucking pussies, right? Like it just can't happen, right?
Yeah,
it is unacceptable for us.
I agree. I'm all stone face. I think
No. True story. I think about, back when I started jiu-jitsu in Brazil, or when I started here, Renzo was always such I looked up to him so much because he was so kind and like so accepting, and he would make you feel like a stud. And at the end of the day, he would whoop anyone's ass. He was freaking, if push comes to shove, that side is there 100%. And that's something that I think, especially as we grow, we are constantly, and Elliot, thank you for being a driving force in this. Make sure, that's important, because that's what we do. And if you forget about what you do and get lost in all this bullshit, that's not what we're doing.
Yeah, it's irrelevant.
Yeah, and the bullshit is important too. Like what you just called the bullshit, because it's not bullshit, right? Like just like I hope we're all getting the terms here. It's not. It's really important. It's super important to like actually accept and listen to your staff, right? And let them be able to tell you what they think, and then have you not be like, okay, cool, let's get on the mat.
You can still be. I mean, I'm a big believer of being vulnerable and being a badass. Like for me, like a lot of the stuff that drives me is like, what is going to make me more of a badass? I know that sounds like cheesy, but what I mean by that is like, what can I do as a human to be tougher, to be better? What can I face every day to add some struggle in my life? And that's like, I think you can still have both. And I think the people that are the battle, why I'm fucking getting sad about this, but I think about my kids. But I think you have to lead from both places. And I think that makes you a stronger company and a stronger person if you can like accept that soft side and still have it when you need it, but still have that I don't want to say dark side, but that badass side has to exist. Otherwise, it's like, in my opinion, you're not a full person. It's like you're halfway there. You're soft and nice, and everybody loves you, and you're sweet. But then when push comes to shoves, are you going to run away and back down? Like, are you going to change? I think both need to exist in my life for to be the best person I can be, like vulnerability and being a badass or tough, if you will.
We're already here, so I'm gonna just ask you the question. Yeah. Like you and I had a tough conversation. I don't know, a couple months ago. Yeah, we argued for a minute. Just a second. Yeah. You remember what I'm talking about? Yeah.
The camera's right there. I can't hide it. Yeah. Okay. I think it was about an email. Is that how?
Yeah, something. I don't know. I don't know where it started, but it went there, and then we were talking about what you just talked about, right? Like this badass side and this vulnerable side, and I just wanted to ask you a question. You said, and maybe I took it wrong. We can do that with each other sometimes. That you're trying to crush that bad part of you. And I was like, well, and I pushed back on you, like, I think we can do it better, right? And maybe I didn't express that part super well. We can do that worse, that devilish side, if you're gonna
whatever you want to call
it, the dark side, the devil, whatever it is. But it still has to exist a little bit. It still does push you. It still is necessary. And I was trying to make that point, and I think that's the point you were just trying to make. Is it? I guess is my question.
Yeah, I think what we're missing is how it's presented to the world.
Got it.
I think that's where we come into conflict
on
it. But I think we both agree with that.
Right.
Like, vulnerability is huge. Like right. I love my kids. I hug them. I'm a big affectionate person, and I'm also like, okay, where can the pain and struggle come from to make sure I'm not just soft, that I'm both.
Right.
And usually I try to keep those things. They're mine. I hold on to them.
Right.
But I see the added advantage when you're in a leadership role to present both sides, because I think it's good for people to have something to look up to. Not that anybody looks up to me, but that idea of to hold both, to know that both can exist. Mm-hmm. And I think for you and me, I think the conflict came up with just how we present it to the world. And I think that was the conversation. And I don't think you disagreed. Like, I think mm-hmm. I can present it poorly, and I think you can present it poorly. But I think deep down, right, what we both want the same thing. It's just how it comes up.
Right.
And that's where it came from.
And I totally agree with you on the be a badass term. Like, you know this. I think you need to be a badass. I think it's super important. You want to say something?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's the Jordan Peterson quote, like, a little bit. And I know he's super controversial, whatever. But there's no what does he say? There's no virtue in not if you don't have the capability of whooping someone's ass, to not whoop someone's ass. There's zero virtue in that. You can't fucking do it. So whatever. The virtue is being able to do it and then controlling that shit. Right? So yes, be a fucking badass. Yeah. Be a badass. But then you have to have this other side where it's not just pouring down on people all the time. And not just physically beating their ass, but just like mentally putting them down, verbally putting them down, emotionally putting them down, because you know at the end of the day that you can whoop their ass. That's unacceptable, right? That is the not controlling your virtue of being a badass.
Yeah. Not being a bully.
Yeah.
I was going to say to all of your points, I think you guys have all made really good points. But it's like, we started off with the question, like, how does all the value talk and the agreements and all the other things that, like, you know, in a very like facetious way you classify it as being woke, right? How does that intersect with what we're actually doing, which is learning how to fight and be tough and all those things? And I don't think it does, right? I think they're not mutually exclusive. And I've always felt that the people who I admire the most are the people who, you know, like you just said, have the ability, right, but are the nicest and most. It's what made me love this place, right, in the beginning. It's like I remember, you know, all the fights and the bad behavior that I you know was a part of in my early 20s and before.
And you're saying without us,
before jiu-jitsu was all done out of insecurity, right? And I want to point out that insecurity, it's visible. So when you. And I think this just goes to all of us. It's like when we're behaving before we behave a certain way, ask what are your real motives for why you're going to do whatever it is you're going to do. And a lot of it is insecurity. It's like, why do we need loyalty? Why do we need people to bow to us? Because there's something. It's like it's validation, right? And the people who are most confident, the people who really are strong, are the ones who can be vulnerable. So it goes all the way back to this vulnerability piece. I've always viewed people who can be really open, who can admit to being wrong, as the people who can apologize first. Those are the true strong people. And you know, one of the things I've always been proud of at Easton and jiu-jitsu in general is you take people who come in off the street and you can see it a mile away. It's insecurity masquerading around as bravado, and then jiu-jitsu crushes that. It breaks down and gets rid of that fake confidence and builds up real confidence, which is why you see people come in who have been in fights their whole lives, and not everybody, but there's certainly an archetype. Somebody comes in, they've been in fights, they're insecure, they learn how to do jiu-jitsu, and they never get in an altercation ever again outside of the academy. And it's because they have the confidence now. They don't need to be validated, you know. And so I think like all of the values that we're talking about connect to this, you know. And it's not even that they're not mutually exclusive. They're actually like, this is all like being able to be vulnerable. The more you do jiu-jitsu, the tougher you become, the more genuine confidence you have, the more vulnerable you can become, in my opinion.
I mean, I'll just speak for me. It didn't come for me for a little bit until I got good. I got very good, you know. If you watch that one reel that my editor edited, that made me sound like I was like best in the world, which it's funny what editing can do. I was like, God damn it, take that down. I had to then break a little bit afterwards, right? I had more work to do after becoming very, very good at the martial art, right? And then I could start to push through some of the barriers, but I would still say it's jiu-jitsu. Even though it took a little longer, like my arc took way longer, and it's still something that, you know I have to work on still. We were just talking about it a second ago in our meeting, like in a situation where what you were saying, just to back up what you were saying, Ian, an event was happening, and I was talking about this anxiety that I get, and I was already in the middle of some bigger anxiety in general, and I'm like, man, and I start to like show up to this thing where I know everyone's going to be there, and I'm like, God, and I know what the other side looks like. You know what you were saying, like this bravado, this bullshit, this being an asshole a little bit, this bullyish kind of thing, and I get all this anxiety about being that, but that all really is just my own personal insecurity and bullshit, you know, that I have to work on. So that's what it all does, and that's what we're here to do. So if we can't use the actual words, insecurity, vulnerable, agreements, values, because that's what we're talking about, then it's really hard to implement them and put them into our businesses and actions.
Well,
Yeah, it was just a thought. Amal, for you, because I like to break terms down, and I like to break generations down like this personally. If you knew Renzo before he came to Brazil, you're an OOG. Okay? If you knew Renzo, before he came to America. Okay? If you knew Renzo at the at the methadone clinic, if that's when was your first introduction to Renzo, you're an OG. And if you're a blue basement, then you're just a G. Okay? So you're an OOG. I'm an OG, you're an OOG. What does all this feel like to you as you watch like the landscape of the company, of jiu-jitsu in general? What does it feel like to you as it changes? Because you were at the very, very, very beginning, and now, man, it's just so different to watch jiu-jitsu schools, to see the level of some jiu-jitsu schools, to see different kinds of jiu-jitsu schools, because there wasn't different kinds of jiu-jitsu schools when you started, right? There was just a jiu-jitsu school.
The evolution has been wild to watch, and I think it goes in all kinds of different directions. You hear a lot of people talk about, in Portuguese they call it Nutella, or how people are getting soft. In America they talk about how it's becoming like a karate or something like that. And I don't think any of that is necessarily true, but I think that that's an important thing to pay attention to. I think that the schools in Brazil, I think that they didn't necessarily try to make sure you stayed. You had to have a certain medal to be able to stay within the school. That doesn't mean everybody in the school was super tough. Some people are not that tough, but they're mentally strong enough just to not leave, and they got tough. So I think that's a constant struggle that everybody sees as we grow, because we're trying to grow and influence a lot of people in a positive way, and we're trying to do that in such a way that it makes them stronger humans. And so that's always a delicate balance, and we always talk about that a lot. So, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and man, there's a couple of things that you and we talked about this in the meeting, this idea of creating the metal in people still. Right, because let's be clear what we're doing. We're trying to grow, and when you hear that word, everyone goes, "Oh, those guys want to get rich," right? Those guys want to get rich. They want to sell jiu-jitsu like McDonald's sold hamburgers, and make a fuck ton of money and still have it be a hamburger. Same thing with jiu-jitsu. Yes, and I don't think that was our first goal at all. I think our first goal in this grow thing was, I don't know. You tell me if I'm wrong here. To have someone be able to do this thing that they love for a career, not just this job that they do when they're 20, and then what? And then have to grow up because they had 2 kids, or they need a house, or want to start a business, or whatever it is, and then have to go get a real big boy job or a big girl job because this doesn't cut it. I would say that was probably one of our first motives, but to do that you need money. But we also don't want to lose the metal of where jiu-jitsu was founded. Mike, this was a big thing for you, I remember, right? You came back from Costa Rica. Was it Costa Rica or Puerto Rico?
Puerto Rico, maybe?
I don't know. Emily was pregnant.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that was
okay.
That's right. I think it was that. It's a precarious balance we have to walk, right? Because all of us in this room and plenty of others in the old school, we came up competing, training hard every day. Probably not the best technique always, but that was it, right? Just training as hard as possible all the time. And that was how we knew jiu-jitsu. And we talked about this in the previous meeting. There still needs to be that everywhere. That still should be a big part of jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, right? But we don't do Muay Thai the way we used to do it. It's not, people aren't getting knocked out at sparring practice anymore, right? It's tech sparring with, sometimes people go hard and you balance it back. But I think we've learned in general that is not the way to train Muay Thai, right? Or in MMA too, you don't see that anymore.
They don't do it in pro sports.
No, they don't.
Right? Pro sports don't do this. The NFL doesn't line up.
It shortens your career.
Yeah.
And that doesn't take away the toughness, right? It just adds some longevity to your career, in my opinion. But you can still be a badass. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. But that part is still extremely important to Easton. That is it. Without that, we aren't Easton. We aren't anything. But what makes us different is the careers, right? That is what really sets us apart. And Ian talked about this previously earlier today too. A lot of schools exist. A lot of schools exist where You can be a teacher, you can be a high-paid teacher, you can teach private lessons, but how are we really developing our staff to actually have a career with us for a long-term career? And if we wanted to do it just to make money, we wouldn't have created HQ positions, program director positions that help run each department. We wouldn't have department heads and front desk first impression specialists, and then academy operation directors. We have areas that can focus on one thing, so we can still focus on our martial arts being the best. But also those other areas can focus on people developing themselves in their career. So we've created a lot of fucking positions for a company our size, like a lot. And we sacrifice money for that, right?
Let's be clear. We all profit share here.
Yeah, we all profit share here.
The four of us. We all profit share. We would make way more money without some of these positions, and we don't.
Yeah, because it's not about that. Like it was like when we decided to make this happen, we talked about like, okay, where we're at now. It's like maybe 6 years ago. We're like, I'm okay with this amount of money now for a long time, and we can stay that way and not worry about it. And we've grown significantly since then, but haven't added too much money, if any money at all, to our pockets because we wanted to take it to grow towards the careers and the staff. So
towards our personal pockets.
Yeah, personal pockets.
Yes,
exactly.
Yes.
This hasn't been about that. It's been about how can we keep people here? How can we develop them? How can we give them careers? And that comes through lots of extra work. We just signed a new lease in Lowry, and that's a fuckload of work. And to be honest, like as individuals, we don't actually need that place, but we need it for Easton, we need it for the team, we need it for the people. And that's why all this exists. That's why Easton.Online came about. Like, how can we give our staff careers outside of teaching if they want it? And not everybody's going to get it. It's getting harder and harder to get those careers because more and more people are seeing it and they're working harder, and people with just more capacity are taking advantage of it, and it's getting harder and harder to get a career at Easton, but it's making us better and better on so many scales. So this whole thing of careers is something that like we really, really are passionate about, and that's what's changing Easton. That's what's created these systems. It's just been like a process of necessity, and it's built us into a more refined machine, and we're just going to keep fucking improving, and we're going to keep getting better.
I think about the Steve Jobs book. So I just got done like a month ago. I got done the Jobs book, and I don't know. The big takeaway from me was his word in Apple: think different. Right? Like, think different. Move the industry. Make it different. Don't just do it how everyone else does it. And I think that's a really big thing with us. And look, when you think different, you're going to have some misses. Right? You're going to be like, oh, wow, that wasn't good. And it moves it a little farther over here. And then you got to recover. And then you're just going to move it farther over, and you got to recover. So, I mean, that's a big thing with this too, right? Like when you have a larger company, when you have a larger school, or even when you have a smaller school and there's like these little cliques that start, you see that happen, right? The clique moves the school this way, and then these other groups come in, right? I'm sure you've seen it over the years, right? Amazing. You know? You got to be able to move and adjust with that, with those things. Like, it's not the end of the world either way, right? And it shouldn't be. The idea is, can you stay in the game? Can you keep fighting the fight and adjust to make it better?
I'm talking about pay attention. It's like parenting. It's like having a relationship. If you give up, if you quit on it, whether it's parenting, your relationship, your friendships, maybe a sport you're into, once you back away and just sort of let things just be the way they are, it's gonna start going south. Mm-hmm. Right? You can't stay with the status quo forever, because if you stay with the status quo, eventually it'll be below the status quo. In my opinion, right? So like everything we do, whether it's the parenting, the running the schools, hiring people, it is we learn and we implement it, and we always try to improve it. And yeah, there's some things that like you got to learn from. Like, man, that's not how I do it, but the younger generation has it this way, and I'm gonna accept it. You know, there's a lot to it that goes into all these things. And I think for me, when I look at it, it's like, just keep paying attention. Just keep paying attention. You know, for me, that's like the biggest thing.
Yeah. I think that's a good point, and I think that has been since the roots of jiu-jitsu. You know, like the jiu-jitsu that Helio practiced was not the jiu-jitsu that he learned from wherever he learned it, and it is not the jiu-jitsu that he taught, and the jiu-jitsu we do today is not the jiu-jitsu necessarily that we'll be doing in 10 years. And I could say the same thing for our operations manual, for every single thing we do in our business. If you're not paying attention and you're just taking things for granted, you are not keeping up with the times. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it worth doing, and that's what makes it hard.
this idea of this is how we've always done it is cockamamie to me, in the sense of like we'd still like if this is how we've all what's that?
That was a good word.
No. If this is how we've always done it, when we'd still be like riding horses across the country. It's these people that have said think differently along the way, right? Like the Jobs quote again. That's what has moved the industry. That's what that's what has moved every industry. That's what's moved society. That's what's pushed us. And that's what we always need to be doing. Like with our schools, we need to think a little different. We need to hold on to what was good from that. Right? Like we're not like when you watch jiu-jitsu now, everyone goes, "Oh, the jiu-jitsu of today." Man, no one's giving their back up. No one's like, "Hey, take my back and then I'll start," No. Right? You're saying, and you love this term. These are the first principles, right? These are first principles. I'm going to move from first principles. I'm going to try to think differently while including those first principles and going from there.
I like that a lot. Just fundamentals, foundations. Like Amal can speak to this. This is what I think what started the path for Easton. Like his decision, I think with maybe Almeida and some others, like to change the way you look at training in jiu-jitsu. I think that was what changed Easton originally to start looking at things differently. And Amal walks this weird path anyway. Like having him behind us, I think is a big part of it. Like who the fuck moves to Brazil at 26 to try to start practicing this martial art and lives on the other side of a river that he has to take a boat to shore every day, right? Not speaking the language with an acupuncture degree. Like who does that, right? And then comes back to America and figures out how to change it into, because he wants to teach. And then boom, all of a sudden it's not just that. He's like, okay, I did what I wanted to do, but it's still not right. I want to change the way we shape training. So we're going to create a fundamentals program with a stripe system that stops you from training till a certain point. Like every little iteration, the seeds that he planted along the way, I think gave us the opportunity to do these things, to create iterations.
God, as much as you might annoy me sometimes with the way that you do it, I'm like, man, it could be no other way. And I'm saying jokingly annoy me, right? Like it could be no other way, because that made me think different. Right? That made all of us think different, in a sense of like, okay, let's make it better. Let's not just do what they said. Let's move a little bit, right? I'm gonna see if I can always change my salad, even though this is the salad that's on the menu, right? Like this is just how you roll naturally. Like you don't have to think to do it. And I think it's just it's just a credit to the personality, I guess, in a sense of. Yeah.
Ian and I went to dinner last night, and we got this.
I heard it was terrible.
We got the scallops. It was $46 a plate. We were like, well, let's try these. They look good. We wanted something light. Everything else was steak. And I ate one, and I couldn't eat more. And then Ian ate two, and we had to send it back. We just couldn't do it because it was so. I've never done that in my life, and it was so bad. And I think the chef was trying to be creative. They put blueberry juice on the scallops, and they were purple. There is a time.
How do you say that word? Say that word again.
Scallops.
Scallops.
How do you say it?
Scallops.
Scallops.
Interesting.
There's two L's, right?
Yeah.
So I think I just make it in all scallops. Scallops. I think you're right, though.
I don't know. I'm not saying I'm right. I was just, I think it's interesting how people say different words sometimes. Ian, so you said that dinner was terrible.
Yeah, it wasn't very good.
We had the best waitress we ever had in our life,
Yeah,
though. She was amazing.
Great.
All right. Guys, I think that's a good spot. Call it sauna time. Right? Sauna time. Mike was challenging Ian earlier, so we're going to see how this goes. Ian's ready to die. If you guys have, if you know Ian, Ian will die for the Lieberman honor sometimes.
Just a challenge. You want something to happen. Ian will, if you doubt his mettle, if you will.
So as always, guys, go check us out, Easton.Online. We have a ton of free information on there. Where you can get some of our guides on how we do intro classes, on how we do, what else do we have on there, Phipps? Sales a little bit, right? And then, I can't remember what else, but go to Easton.Online, get our free stuff. These podcasts are everywhere that you listen to podcasts. Shout out to Phipps, as we've been mentioning. He always does a great job with the editing. He keeps me from doing it on my computer, right? I always say I want to do it on my computer, and Phipps just looks at me and shakes his head and gets mad at me. You do that too, Mike?
No, he's doing that to me these days.
Yeah, right? You're like, dude, I bought this nice camera. And Phipps is like, no, I'll do it better. And I'm like, no. And I bring it up every meeting that he should just let me. And every time I bring it up, every time I'm wrong. And every time Phipps does a great job. So shout out to Phipps. You want to say something?
I don't think you trust us. That's what it is. You don't assume trust with us. You're breaking your
Just
core
like,
value.
How nice can your camera on your computer be? It's not as nice as my camera, I promise you.
It's hard when you just know better.
Just shake
Sometimes you just got to keep quiet with that know better, but sometimes you just know better.
He knows better.
So yeah, go check out at Easton.Online or at Easton.Online for on Instagram. We are all on social media. I think we all put some pretty different and interesting content out. You know, Amal travels all over the place, so that is his content. Mike is all about these running things these days, so Mike has a great running blog going on his social media. Ian shares and likes a lot of things.
I post pictures of my German Shepherd and my Golden Retriever. That's about it. Not that interesting.
And yeah, I'm definitely a different flair. So find one of us if you like one of us and go check it out. And obviously, we are always here to help. Please reach out with anything that you might need. And hopefully, if we don't have the answer, we will find the answer. Go out there and crush your schools, everyone. Thanks for tuning in.